lighting. Again, we plan to break ground in spring of 2019 and have much of the park reopened by December of 2019. I have a flyer that I'll put on back that has more highlights of the park and also a link where you can access more information if you want a lot more details than that. Thanks for the time.
Is there announcements? Any others? Dave Hartman. I'll be talking about this in the councilor's comments, but I know some people leave early and the meeting can go on for a while. So December 6th at 6 o'clock, City Hall, Town Hall meeting, the future of the auditorium. So it's December 6th, 6 o'clock. We'll have, we got all the information back from the questionnaire, and CEO's been working hard on this. And so we're trying to finalizing plans for the auditorium, and so we'll have a town hall meeting that night, December 6th, 6 o'clock. It would be great to come, get everyone's input. It's not too late to voice your concerns or get information, and so I hope to see everybody there on December 6th. Thanks.
Bobby, how do you do it?
Yeah, this one works. Bob Hoover, I'm the guy that was responsible for the yellow signs in all your yards, and the first thing I'd like to do is say thank you very much for your vote of confidence. I just spent the last 3 days getting trained on what you're supposed to do. Immediately, I'd like to say my hat's off to Mr. Wright for the number of years that he faithfully trudged down there and did his job, and a good job he did. I'll just let you know I posted something on Front Porch Forum and got a lot of response to the question that was there. I'm going to keep my Facebook page up and running, and the website, although it'll just refer you back to the Facebook page. The email that's on there will be the same, and anybody that wants to actually call, 363-5842 is the number. You won't get me, but you get the voicemail, and my wife is already complaining because there's no time to make calls home. But when you get home, I guess you get to do that. This is an awesome responsibility, and it's much more than I ever thought it was going to be. So I really want to hear from you all about what you think should be happening down there. There are two voices that you have, and we should be ringing our bells often. This probably will be a very eventful legislative session. Nobody at this point knows exactly how this gang of whatever is going to come together to do something, but there's a lot of very important stuff on the hopper. So please do not hesitate at all to call, write, or come up in the store and say that was a stupid thing to do. You may not always agree, but at least I will appreciate hearing your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements?
I'm Donna Walters from Seaford Park Green. I will be doing a presentation a little bit later on the agenda, but I wanted to mention that if you're interested in signing the petition about City Hall Park, there's a sign-up sheet. The petition is on the table and an email sign-up sheet, and there's also 2 clipboards that are going around. I see it's stuck over here on the chair. Yeah, so if you could just keep that circulating, that would be great. One is to sign the petition, and the other is to sign up for our email list. Thank you.
Any other announcements?
Try and make an announcement. Can people talking into the mic, can you please talk into the mic?
Including you?
Right up
Yeah.
Yep.
Please, if you're talking, please talk into the mic directly. I have hearing issues, and it's been making it very difficult to hear. So if you could please talk into the mic.
That also helps.
Loudly and clear. Thank you.
That also helps for the recording and Facebook.
In light of that, I'd like to give my speech over again. One thing that I forgot, it came up a couple of times, and I had the opportunity to ask the Deputy Auditor General from the Air Guard. People had questions about the F-35 and its ability to carry those really nasty thermonuclear weapons. And we had an extensive conversation last night, and the version that we're getting is not. So, not capable of doing that. So, if people that had that question, there's your first answer. Thanks.
And lastly, Chris Tromley, you would like to make a nomination?
Yes, so one of the traditions here at the NPA is we like to elect in, as part of our bylaws, new members to join the steering committee. Tonight, I'd like to nominate Mr. Ryan Frank. And so we'd like to ask that our Ward 7 members, as Ryan's a member of Ward 7, would be able to vote for that. I would look for a second to this.
I second that nomination.
Thank you, James. And Ryan, would you like to say a quick word?
So I'm relatively new to Ward 7. I moved here about a year ago, but I've been living in Burlington for about 10 years and looking for ways to get involved and help out. And folks suggested that I join the steering committee, so pretty excited about it, and hope to help all of you get access to local politics.
Matt, could I ask a vote for Ward 7?
So I will put it to the Ward 7 attendees. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? You guys have it. Woo! Congratulations, Ryan. And we are,
Can I just, so I want to point out that we only have one female on the steering committee, so if you're of that variety and are interested, please let us know so we can have more diversity. So Linda's not lonesome. So anyway, give that some thought and let us know if you want to join.
thanks for that, Jim. And without further ado, it is 7:11. We're 1 minute behind, so we're going to bring up Plan BTV. And Megan, tell us.
I got to introduce Megan. My name is Alex Friend. I'm a planning commissioner. For those of you who you probably know, the Burlington Planning Commission is a 7-member citizen volunteer board. We're appointed by the City Council with mayor providing, and we supervise the work of the planning department, make decisions just like all the other citizen boards and commissions in the city. We are one of two. There are two department heads that are not appointed by the mayor, and that is the planning director of planning, and of course the school superintendent is appointed by the school board. So it's a little different in that respect. We're here tonight to talk to you about Plan BTV, which is our municipal development plan. This is a forward-looking document, that a series of plans that guides how our city will be shaped for the next 10 to 20 years. It's quite a broad project. We are required by state law to update it once every 8 years. And we've been working with, Megan has been developing this over the past year. And we're at the point now where we were putting this out for public comment. There's a draft online. Megan's done quite an extraordinary thing in bringing this document sort of into the 2010s. And so we invite your comments, thoughts. We are, just to put in another plug for another meeting next week, we have a special meeting of the Planning Commission in Contours on December 5th. And I have a little flyer I'm going to pass around. I'm here to tell you about the plan. I have an actual planner, Megan Tuttle.
Thank you, Alex. Sure thing. Is right here good? Okay, perfect. Thank you for that introduction, Alex. As Alex said, I'm here to talk to you tonight about Plan BTV, and I do see some familiar faces. I know many of you were here in the spring when I came to talk to you about this as well, and some of you even attended a special workshop that we had here in the spring. So this is kind of a continuation of that discussion and that update that we provided to you earlier this year. As Alex mentioned, Plan BTV is our comprehensive, we call it our comprehensive plan for Burlington. It is a plan that addresses the entire city. It's a plan that looks 10 to 20 years in the future for our city, and it addresses a very wide range of topics about our city's future. Everything from how we use and develop the land in the city, to things like transportation or the economy or even our parks and natural spaces in the city. This plan talks about all of these things together and how they interact with one another in the future. This plan is also made up of and supports other planning work that you may have heard of or participated in. I'm sure most of you in the room have heard the term Plan BTV before. We've developed a number of specific studies that were part of Plan BTV, like our downtown plan or
the parks master plan. Those are all things that are part of the Plan BTV document that I'm going to talk about today. One of the things that Alex mentioned is that we've been working to bring this plan into the future. When we talk about the future, we've been trying to bring this plan into the future as well. Many of the policies and kind of directions that are in the plan are things that we've been working towards for a very long time as a city. However, the previous structure of our plan meant that some of those policies and concepts were hard to understand or hard to really interpret. So one of the things that we've been trying to do with this update is frame what we're going to do, I'm getting the cue to move over, what we're going to do for the future of the city in terms of the city's characteristics and things that we value about Burlington. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what those things are. The first thing that we hear and talk a lot about when we think about Burlington today and Burlington in the future is how Burlington is a distinctive community. Things that make us unique from other places. And this touches on things all the way from the natural environment, the natural setting that our city is set within, to the resources, those natural resources, parks, special open spaces that we have inside the city. This touches on things like our built environment and how it is unique and distinctive, such as our historic resources and where and how we've chosen to put houses and how our downtown is formed. It also talks about things like our individual identities and our community's identity. What types of businesses and organizations are part of our community's fabric in Burlington and how those contribute to our uniqueness as well. So when we think about what it means for Burlington to be a distinctive city in the future, there are a number of policies that will guide the work that we'll continue to do in order to preserve and foster that identity. The first is obviously to continue to protect the quality of those natural resources. This is a neighborhood of the city that's really blessed to have many of these natural resources right in your backyards probably in some cases. Lots of natural communities, open spaces, parks, the lake, the river, all of these resources that are important for us to ensure that we're protecting the quality of in the future, and all of the actions that are associated with doing that. The next part of this is preserving the built identity of the city. We have a lot of really diverse neighborhoods in the city that are different in terms of what type of housing and what form that housing takes, how our neighborhoods are connected to one another and to other parts of the city. So another kind of principle of this plan is to really facilitate and enhance that distinctive fabric of the different neighborhoods of the city. Related to that is protecting and enhancing our historic resources, those actual historic and archaeological resources that we have in the city. Another piece of this is about strengthening our identity from both a cultural and an economic perspective. So really strengthening the city's identity as a cultural center for our region, and then leveraging the types of cultural and economic opportunities we have in the city to further strengthen our economy as we go forward and diversify our job opportunities. The next piece of what this plan, talks about is Rob Point. Is about being a dynamic city. So what this really means is how we respond to challenges, both the ones that we're experiencing today, as well as those challenges that might face us in the future. So how we take all of those things that make us unique and distinctive and really build upon them to respond to our challenges as we go forward. So as you can imagine, this covers a lot of issues. The challenges and opportunities that we're facing, some of them are chronic issues, like the cost of living in the city, or how we physically get around in Burlington, or how many or what type of job opportunities we have in the city. Other ones are challenges that we are just starting to experience or that we don't really know how they're going to impact us yet. One of the chief among these is what are going to be the effects of climate change on us as humans, on our city, and on our natural resources. So again, there are a number of policies that will guide the work that we'll do in the future related to how we continue to be a dynamic city. This talks about how Burlington as a center of many activities for our region, a job center, a business center, a housing center, a cultural center, how we will continue to serve in that role in a way that allows us to also meet the needs of our community and of the residents that live in it. It talks about the changing dynamics of who we are and what our needs are. So as we get older, as we have different needs for our families or for our house itself, how do we ensure that we are responding to those challenges and adapting so that all of our needs can be met? Related to this, how our needs can be met is ensuring that we continue to coordinate the availability of services to support our community. This is everything from the traditional services that we think of, like our utilities, our streets, but also services like recreation and programming. How we make sure these things are keeping sync with our community's needs. One of the big goals that's in here is for us to really make significant progress to reduce our impact on climate change and prepare ourselves to be resilient to those effects. And one of those is to become a net zero energy city, which means that we will generate at least enough renewable energy to cover the energy that we use to move around our city in transportation, to heat our homes, and for electricity. And then finally, well, I guess the last one is related. The net zero energy is a specific goal, but in general, implementing strategies that will help us build our resilience not only to potential climate change impacts, but other hazards that we might experience in our community in the future. The next part of the plan is about our city as an inclusive city, and this really has to do with all aspects of making sure that we're eliminating barriers to equity and providing access for everyone. So as you can imagine, this touches on things like the economy, like housing, like education, like participation in public spaces and parks and programs, how we relate to one another, and how we make sure everyone feels like they're welcome and has an opportunity to be a part of our community. When we look at policies that will guide our work in the future, the first one is about housing. This is something that we talk a lot about in our city. How we make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have a home in Burlington, whether you're looking to rent or own, whether you make very little income or make a lot of income. Making sure we have opportunities for everyone to have a home in Burlington. The next piece of that is about making sure that our homes are safe. So not only the quality of our homes, but how well we can access them or live in them. So as we think about getting older, our needs might change in terms of what our living space is like. So how do we make sure that regardless of our sensibilities or our abilities, we have a safe home to live in? The next piece is about the safety and accessibility then of our public spaces, not just our buildings, but our public spaces too. So how our streets and parks and public buildings become more welcoming, more safe, and more accessible. We talk a lot in here about making sure that everyone has an opportunity to have meaningful employment and a livable wage. And we understand that just saying that we want everyone to have a meaningful job is a pretty ambitious goal alone. But we talk a lot in this plan about all of the supportive infrastructure that we need in order to ensure that people can participate in the workforce if they want. Reliable, accessible transportation, childcare if you have children, other resources, workforce development kind of resources that we might need to be able to help us participate in the workforce. And then providing meaningful opportunities for us to participate in the civic life of our community. This specifically talks a lot about how we can promote and provide opportunities for people who don't typically have an opportunity to participate. Things like language access, things like getting youth involved in the community, a wide range of activities to help really empower and offer opportunity to more people. The last piece is about how we'll become a more connected city. And this is really about how all of these systems work together. that we really need to think about the future of the city in a holistic sense. So this really reflects on everything from how our natural setting and our built setting relate to one another, how we move around the city, how we experience or get to participate in certain parts of our community. It's about having things close to where we live so that we don't always have to travel all the way across town to be able to do something like go to the grocery store or go to the post office. These are the kind of breadth of connections that the plan talks about. Our natural resources come back up in this section because in addition to ensuring that we are protecting the quality of them, we also want to ensure that they continue to be connected in the future. So this part of the plan talks a lot about not only how we kind of preserve the integrity of those significant natural areas and open spaces that we've identified in Burlington, but how we then interact with them as members of the community, how we have opportunities for interpretation or utilization of them for recreation. The next part is about coordinating, making sure that we're coordinating the decisions that we're making about issues, especially about issues like housing, transportation, and the economy. We don't want to identify certain parts of our city where we're going to do, where we want to promote job growth, but we've also said that's where we want housing growth. So it's about coordinating those decisions to make sure they're all working together. Again, guiding important services and amenities into what we call a neighborhood activity center. I think, as a resident of this neighborhood, I think we have one of the best neighborhood activity centers in the city in terms of the types of amenities that we have at the Ethan Allen Shopping Center. We have a lot of those kind of daily needs that not all neighborhoods in the city have. So this part of the plan is about how we make sure that those kind of essential daily services can be brought to where we live so that we can better access them. The next few things are about public kind of facilities and decision making. So how we make sure that we're maintaining our public facilities, that we're keeping them up to the appropriate standards for accessibility or the number of people that are using them. How we make sure they're not deteriorating. That we're coordinating our decision making so that we're not kind of losing sight of decisions that we made just a few years ago, that we're really thinking about the long-term kind of impacts of our decisions over time. And then finally recognizing that while we are a small city, we are an important part of our region, and we have to consider how the decisions we make affect our municipal neighbors and how the decisions they make affect us, because that's a very important relationship that we have there. So the last part of that is about how we engage with our neighbors. So we have this part of the plan that tells us all of the kind of things that we aspire to do around being distinctive and dynamic and connected. The next part of the plan tells us kind of how or where we might achieve some of those things. And it talks about these three sort of distinctive parts of our city. The first one are those areas that our plan talks about us conserving. And again, this is those really important, I keep talking about this because they are such an important part of our community, but those natural resources, the lake, all of those significant natural areas. How will we apply those ideas that I talked about before to those specific parts of our city? Specifically, how do we make sure that there are appropriate protections in place to maintain those areas? How will we manage them? How will we continue to manage them as there's growing demands for recreational use of them, or as climate change might affect the natural functions of some of those spaces? The next part of this talks about areas in the community that we're planning to sustain as residential neighborhoods. Again, I mentioned before, Burlington has a lot of really unique and distinctive residential neighborhoods. And so this part of the plan really talks about those specific strategies that will help us ensure that our neighborhoods continue to be vital and diverse places to live. So how do we, again, bring some of those supporting services and amenities closer to our neighborhoods to make sure they continue to be vibrant, as well as addressing some of the maybe missing housing types that we might have in our city. And then the last part of this plan recognizes that in order for us to have significant parts of the city that we want to preserve as open space and that will be our residential neighborhoods, we have to, or we have identified areas of the city where we might grow, where we might see any of that kind of future development take place in the form of new housing or new commercial growth in the city. And there are a number of these types of places. I've talked already a little bit about neighborhood activity centers, that these are places where we might expect to see a little bit of addition of retail or other services near where we live, maybe some housing close to where we live. Our downtown is a major regional center, and this is the part of our community that we expect in the future to continue to be the most urban part of our community and provide services not only for us as residents, but also for those people who work and use the city for a variety of purposes. And then we talk about other parts of the city that will grow for a special purpose. When we talk about special purposes, we're really talking about things like the institutions and areas of our city that traditionally have been more industrial or manufacturing in nature. What are sort of some of the special considerations that we have for how those areas accommodate those job growth opportunities in the city? So I wanted to just kind of wrap up by reiterating a few points about what this all means to this neighborhood, to our neighborhood. What it means along the North Avenue corridor in particular. The plan is, a new element of the plan is that we have kind of taken a magnifying glass to different parts of the city to really talk about what some of the considerations and future goals are for that part of the city. And North Avenue is one of them. Again, like I've said before, this is really about how do we think about the avenue even more so as kind of our connective tissue. That we have opportunities today that support our needs on a daily basis in terms of being able to get groceries or being able to go to school, accessing the bus, different things like that. How do we use the avenue as that special place to continue to provide those services for us? It's a special link between all of the residential areas that we live in up here and the rest of the city. So this really talks about how we can look at things like the Ethan Allen Shopping Center to help provide more of the resources we need. How we can strengthen transportation options and choices for people that might need something other than their own car. That's something we heard a lot about when we were here in the spring is, how can we improve SSTA service? And, if I walk or bike, how can I improve the safety of the avenue for me as a walker or biker? And then again, finally, strengthening our own connections and access to the parks and other natural resources that we have here to be able to benefit us for natural experiences and for recreational purposes. So as Alex said, we wanted to come and share this with you. I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you might have. But we wanted to come share this with you as a sort of preview and invitation to the presentation that we're having next Wednesday, December 5th at 6:30 in Contois, and to also let you know a little bit about what we'll be doing with this plan in the next several months. So this is really the start of the conversation about this draft plan. As the Planning Commission, after the Planning Commission holds their public hearing, we are also going to be then engaging our City Council and begin to have conversations and presentations and public hearings at the council level to hear from all of you and to hear from them about anything that we might need to add to the plan that's not there today. So stay tuned, I guess, is the point of that. And then finally, as Alex said, and as your handout shows, there is a link on our website where you can go to download the plan or to even look at it online if you'd like, and really dig into the details about what all of this means that I shared tonight. Great.
So we'll open up to questions. Is that all right, Megan? Anyone? Jim?
So, two things. One is this plan will go to 27, 26, 27?
The year?
Yeah.
This plan is actually a 10 to 20 year plan.
Okay, usually
Well-
NPAs are about 7 to 8 years.
I'm sorry, but yes, we will look at it again in 8 years.
Okay, right. So what I see on the drawing there is a backbone where about 72% of the population in North Avenue is not on your plan. So most of the population doesn't reach out there. So as an MVP, I hope that there are many elements to it, and so that I'd like you to consider the other 72% of the new North Enders. I know that's the convenient letter to do, and transportation is just one of the elements that is not properly handled. If you're going to make it the skeleton for which you do the next 8 years, I want to make sure we're really thinking about transportation. We're thinking about some of those other infrastructure systems. Can you talk about?
Off the avenue. Yes.
Off the avenue,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And thank you for that point. There is a part of the north end that is cut off on this picture, but in the plan, the entire city is included in this plan. So when we talk about the avenue, we're really talking about how we use the avenue as that connection that we can then build off of for things like providing services to all the residential neighborhoods that are off of the avenue, as well as how do we strengthen, you're right, that those transportation connections off of the avenue are very difficult to achieve. So how can we supplement those and think about strengthening those? Impossible.
So, and I don't want to do it going back so other people do have time, but as your skeleton for the development, when for instance, when we went to try to solve some of the problems that came up in previous NPA meetings about transportation, they go back and say, well, we look at it as the backbone, and then, so if you draft it as a backbone, as opposed to looking at Ethan Allen and looking at a path that goes out so that you're, a reasonable distance off of, the buses are what, 800 yards from a door to the bus stop, for example? That's where I come up with my 72% are not in consideration. If you're going to make the blueprint flawed by looking at it as a backbone, this is what has come up time and time again. So that's what I'm trying to say is make the blueprint look a little bit less like a backbone, because everybody else will go, oh, we only have to think about the backbone. I want you to think about it like ribs and off of that. And
More appendages off the backbone.
Absolutely. Start with that in the blueprint.
Great, thank you.
To add to that, to add to what Jim is saying, most of the people who live in the new North End cannot access a bus. Today would be a perfect example. And so we need help in, there's no other part of the city that has this lousy coverage of that kind of amenity. And we definitely need to do something about that. Okay? Because you're doing a much better job as I looked at the other neighborhoods. Great. It's our turn.
Anyone else?
Well, just a compliment. I think you did an extraordinary job.
Thank you.
I still can't hear anybody.
I can't repeat his comment.
Oh, I
Yeah,
You've done a beautiful job.
Yeah, I agree, great job. And it seems like this is a preview to your meeting, because it seems like there's so much.
There is a
How
lot
could we
more.
be prepared to come to your meeting that starts at 6:30? And part two, how long will your 6:30 be?
Great. Both great questions. So if you would like to be prepared to come to the next meeting, I would just put this back up on the screen here, the website where you can look at the plan. There is a lot of information there, and there are a lot of specific action items that support all of the things that I talked about tonight that are there. At the meeting, we will have a presentation that will probably be about this length, but then we'll provide opportunity for conversation, and we'll actually have materials around that you can use to browse some of that more specific information. So you don't have to come prepared if you don't have time. You can learn a lot more about the plan at that presentation next week.
Megan, are there any specific action items that people might get excited about that might be coming down the pipe for change, or any specific input that planners are looking for that people people could be thinking about to bring for ideas?
Absolutely. I think that in terms of just hearing the immediate feedback that Jim and Linda offered about what they heard me say tonight, I think that's the kind of thing that we're looking for is, one, did something resonate with you that you think that is really important that you would like us to emphasize? Is there something that we didn't talk about that you think is missing, that you think is really important for us to make sure we cover? Again, as far as anything kind of big or new, I can't think of something off the top of my head that would be really, kind of crazy. But again, just thinking about how we can strengthen this neighborhood in terms of some of those services and amenities that we might not have access to. That's one of the overarching kind of things to be thinking about if you have feedback on it.
And this plan might impact zoning, it might impact laws, it might impact services.
Absolutely. So that's a great question. This plan is used for a number of purposes in the future. The first and foremost thing that I will say is that this plan alone does not change the zoning of any part of our city. What this plan might say is that there are areas of the city where we might want to look at the zoning and evaluate whether or not it's appropriate for what we want to happen in certain places. And then we would use this plan in further conversation with people like Alex and the Planning Commission to talk about what zoning changes might be appropriate and how to go about them. We also use this plan to inform a bunch of other things that we do as a city. It informs work that many of the departments of the city do in terms of what kind of improvements we make to our public infrastructure, what types of programs for housing or economic development we might advance. So it has a lot of breadth in terms of what it affects in the future, both in sort of the short term as well as many years down the road.
Linda?
Nobody else has one. I'm noticing that an increasing number of people who live out here also work out of here, out of their homes. And so I don't know if you've really considered that this end of town isn't purely residential anymore, but there are a significant number of people who have an in-home office and therefore are not driving cars, but we then maybe want to figure out a way with like a loop or bus or something like that, like the rest of the city has, like North End Loop or something, so that people could go to the shopping center or something and get them permanently out of their cars. Okay? I don't know if that's being addressed, but I can tell you there are 25 families in my immediate neighborhood who have only one car. Okay?
That's certainly an example of a kind of changing dynamic of the city that we talk about in the plan, both kind of how and where we work, what our preferences and needs are for what our home provides, and then how we connect to the rest of the city. Those are all really important points that the plan talks about. All right, well, thank you very much.
I just wanted to put a plug in to say that this is a draft. This is the beginning of the public comment process, so please send us your comments. Megan reads and catalogs every single one of them, and it's very helpful. So, thank you.
Will you send us your link or watching? Okay, you're on.
All right, thank you very much. And now we will bring up with a couple of extra minutes the Iceland plan, and I introduce Catherine and Tilly. We are bringing up the Iceland plan, and I'm introducing Catherine and Tilly.
So I'm, Catherine, you need to be over in the front here too. Jeff, you may need somebody to do the computer. Is that on the computer? Okay.
Okay, so I'll just do a quick introduction. This talk is generally divided into two parts. The first part talks about the economics of addiction. It talks about brain chemistry. The second part is about prevention and the Icelandic model and what we can do to address our epidemic of addiction in Vermont. And I have two videos that I have trouble with, and so I'm going to go ahead and just show them at the beginning. One's a minute and the other's 3 minutes. They don't take long, but there's a lot of information, and we can use that as we go through some of these issues.
situation, how could something be bad if doctors say it's good? Ads state that cigarettes are good. That's concern about. Mr. Mike next week. That's concern about the health risks increasing. No. Cigarette companies design ad campaigns with doctors. The strategy is to confuse. How could something be bad? That's concern about the health risks increasing.
Jim to the rescue.
That's concern about the health risks increasing. Cigarette companies design ad campaigns with doctors. The strategy is to confuse. How could something be bad if doctors say it's good? Ads state that cigarettes are good for you, good for digestion.
Tension relief. We begin with a niche market.
Sorry, everybody.
As concern about the health risks increases, cigarette companies design ad campaigns with doctors. The strategy is to confuse. How could something be bad if doctors say it is good? Ads state that cigarettes are good for you, good for digestion, weight loss, stress and tension relief. We begin with a niche market, with some states banning cigarette use. Health concerns are raised, but the industry pushes ahead, marketing with doctors. It's 1950, and big tobacco is booming, one of the most profitable industries in the world. The smoking rate is nearly 4,000 cigarettes per person per year. And then, the 1952 issue of Reader's Digest, the most popular magazine in America, publishes the article, Cancer by the Carton. In reaction, the heads of the largest tobacco companies hold a secret meeting in New York's Empire State Building in December of 1953. They decide to sow doubt about the health findings of cigarettes. They pay to publish an article called A Frank Statement to Cigarette Smokers in 448 newspapers. It questions evidence that cigarettes cause cancer. Marijuana is using all the same strategies. Tactic 1, make smoking marijuana seem good for you. Smoking tobacco was linked to lung cancer in 1929, but it took 30 years and millions of deaths to prove that smoking caused lung cancer. Marijuana is positioned as medicinal, but studies show that it negatively affects the brain. It's been linked to IQ loss, increases mental illness, and according to every single scientific body, is addictive. And for young people whose brains are still developing, marijuana has an irreversible impact. Addiction rates go way up. 1 in 6 who start marijuana use before age 18 become addicted. And for daily smokers, the risk of addiction rises to 50%. School dropout rates increase, and the risk of schizophrenia increases by 600%.
In the brain chemistry of addiction video, we learn that youth are especially susceptible to addiction. The youth brain is easily rewired compared to the adult brain, which has more solid neural pathways.
Imagine that someone has an apple and takes a big bite. Dopamine is released in the brain. Dopamine is a naturally occurring neurotransmitter that helps us experience pleasure and creates the motivation for us to do things that are necessary for our survival. If you could graph dopamine and its effect on mood, it would look something like this. When dopamine rises, we feel good. This teaches the brain that food is important and that we should seek food when needed, even subconsciously. This same thing happens when we achieve a goal. Dopamine is released and we feel good, and this teaches the brain that achieving goals is important. This reward mechanism is essential since the brain is learning things necessary for survival. Now back to addiction. Someone chooses to try a drug. The user may feel a high and it may feel great temporarily. Dopamine levels rise a lot, 2 to 10 times what would occur with natural rewards. This can trick the brain into thinking that the drug is important for survival, perhaps even the most important thing for survival.
The alcohol video explains data and research not generally known about alcohol use disorder. Here's a short clip from the alcohol video.
However, when it comes to alcohol use, very few people are average. According to one of the largest scale research studies on the topic, the NESARC survey of about 44,000 adults, nearly 50% of adults either don't drink at all or drink very little. The next 10% drinks less than a drink a week. The next 10% drinks 2.2 drinks per week, followed by 10% who drink 6.3 drinks per week, or about a drink a day. The next 10% drinks 15.3 drinks per week, or about 2 drinks per day. The last 10%, an estimated 24 million adult Americans, drink an average of 74 drinks per week, which is 75% of the alcohol adults consume. Many in this group are devastated by alcohol, and it has dramatic impact on friends and family.
The opioids and heroin video explains the trends.
So we'll get into the talk now. That's a lot of background, but it's important to.
You need to move over because you're not on the camera.
Yeah, I can't because I have to advance it here. So this slide is to remind me to let you know that those videos were done by Heidi Heilman, and they're copyrighted. And they've been picked up by Rotary International. Rotary International took on polio in the past, and now they've taken on addiction as their disease to eradicate. And the first step in their path to trying to eradicate addiction is to educate the public in forums like these as to what are the seeds of addiction, what is fueling this, and how can we best address it. These are contact information, and this is just sort of a roadmap for our talk today. We're going to talk about the drivers of addiction, which the film talked a little bit about, the science of brain chemistry, and then the last part of the talk is how that informs our information and options about prevention and treatment in Vermont. So right now in Burlington and all over the United States, we're spending a lot of time talking about and thinking about how to save the 3 people who die every single week in Vermont from an overdose. Right, we're going to lose about 60 or 70,000 people this year from an overdose, and this is an emergency. And so we all have, all hands on deck to try to save those lives. That's understandable. It's exactly what we need to do. But we also understand that that's very, very expensive, and we didn't get here by accident. And if we analyze the source of it, we'll understand that addiction starts as a pediatric disease. So we saw that in the video. Your brain as a child is very susceptible to addiction. So if you can wait until you're 30 to try any kind of addictive substance, you will probably spend your whole life and will have a very low rate of addiction. Or if you do develop a disease, it'll be easier to eradicate it. But if you were exposed by accident or by intention at 10 or 12 or 14, anytime in the teenage years, it increases your rates of addiction, and that on a population basis has profound impact, and the industry understands that completely. Therefore, they target kids. We also know from the Iceland model that addiction is a public health issue, it's preventable, and it can be cured. So what Iceland teaches us is that we can do things to decrease our addiction rates, that addiction is not a moral failing, right? It's not judgmental. And as a society, as a group, as a state, as a community, there are things that we can do, that we can put in place to protect our children and to create more bonds between community, and those are protective for our kids, and they decrease the rates of addiction down the road. So, for example, one analogy is right now in Vermont, there's water all over the kitchen floor, right? So we're all on our hands and knees, and we're working really hard to get it cleaned up. And we're always spending all our time with our head down, trying to get the water. But nobody is analyzing the problem and realizing that the pipe needs to be fixed. So what this talk is trying to get our attention is to look up and think about and analyze what are the sources, what is the seed, what is really causing this addiction. And a lot of it, when we come down to it, is an industry of addiction which has figured out that it's very profitable to create addicts that consume their particular product, whatever it happens to be. So this is a fantastic diagram. It shows that when they started 20 years ago, they had the highest rates of addiction. Iceland had the highest rates of addiction in all of Europe. So Iceland's a part of Europe, and they didn't know why, right? So, and for the first couple of years, they made changes, and it just say no, and they used scare tactics and various things, and none of them worked. So then they went back to the drawing board and really started to analyze the problem, use science, change the environment for the children and the adolescents through the schools and the after-school programs and the communities. And they brought their rates just year by year by year by year down. Now, other things didn't change. So the economics didn't change. This is about using scientific intervention on things that we know work and bringing addiction rates down. So the developing ring, we've already been through this, is easily addicted. Youth exposed to addictive products become dependent more easily. And we also found that very concentrated products will addict more easily. So pick whatever category you want to talk about. Tobacco, the tobacco companies sprayed with free-base nicotine. Opiates, they developed more and more addictive, horrible, dangerous opiates. The marijuana right now in Colorado is more concentrated than it's ever been in the history of the world. So the industry is really smart at figuring out how to change their product so that it's really addictive. And that serves them because they need people with substance abuse disorders in order to fuel their profit. So if they don't produce people with substance abuse disorders, the 80%, like in the video, that are consuming, the 20% of consumers who are consuming 80% of the product, they won't make a profit. So it's important that we understand these motivations, which are largely hidden from the public. So we went through this before too. A 25-year-old exposed to an addictive substance for the first time, it's difficult for them to become an addict because the brain is past the primary stages of development. And if you're exposed later, it's easier to use in moderation or to stop later on. So this is how they started out in Iceland in the beginning. We had scientists who were producing great studies. They had lots of good information. Legislators were steering the ship of state blindfolded, and the parents and teachers and providers, who are really the power right behind the ship, were blindfolded as well. And 10 years later, the blindfolds were off. So, so this is a quote from our RAND report, and it just goes over what we've been talking about. The daily, near daily users account for 80% of all pick your drug, alcohol, drugs, tobacco expenditures. For-profit companies can be expected to focus on creating and maintaining these heavy users. Dependence is good for the bottom line. So what I want to communicate and have people become aware of is that the industry does not see us as people, right? They see us as things. So when our baby pops out, they see that brain as a possible profit source for the next 20, 40 years. And it's in our best interest to understand how they see us so that we can protect that child's brain and to live a happy, healthy life. And then the other piece of what Bo Kilmer said, who was the author of the RAND report, this was in his testimony to the Senate Finance Committee. Our free speech doctrine makes it very difficult to restrict advertising. So one of the things that if we were to decide to do Iceland is to restrict some of the advertising. So we know that when we had the tobacco settlement, one of the things that they did was they made the tobacco companies agree not to use Joe Camel, right? Not to advertise to children. When I was a kid, they had candy cigarettes. We had the Marlboro Man in the college dorms, right? When I was young, we had lots of advertising for Virginia Slims. So, you know, it was stylish, it was sexy, you were thin, if you smoked cigarettes, Virginia Slims. So all this is very sophisticated advertising that's aimed at our brainstem, right? So it's not my fault, right, that I had a Marlboro Man on my wall in college. But it's important to understand that they're targeting really something that's really in our lower brainstem when they're trying to get us to use their product. So this is just an example of you know, product placement, the cigarettes right next to the candies. So this emphasizes this idea again that we've got people who have substance abuse disorders fight against two significant forces, and they don't have probably lived their whole life and never heard of them. So one is the economics of addiction, and the other is the brain chemistry of addiction. So the brain chemistry being that if you can keep your child from being exposed to it until they're through adolescence or 20, 30 years old, then you have a much better chance at a healthy, happy life. And the other is that brain chemistry of addiction is if you can outlaw or prevent these extremely dangerous, concentrated, addictive substances from being readily available and cheap, then or advertised, then you can also protect your community. So we know that these, the industry is interested in producing brains that consume their product. And unfortunately, when they do that, when they focus their energies on producing people who want to consume a lot of addictive substances, that ends up being very expensive for every single person in this room. So whether you're an addict or not, whether I'm an addict or not, whether your father, your mother, your brother, your employee, your boss, right? Whether you are completely isolated from this problem of addiction, it's got its hand in your pocket. So we all pay for this. We all pay for increased crime. We all pay for increased rehabs. We all pay for the increased school system, special ed, whatever it is, right? So it's something that affects us all. But if we can take that sort of investment and invest it in the children and in the environment and the playgrounds and in the counselors up front and sort of outlawing the advertising to children, then we have a much better chance of having addiction-free community later on. And this just shows that the industry is so powerful that it does not allow enough taxation to pay for these costs that end up burdening our society. So this is a representation of, it's just another industry. And think about R.J. Reynolds. When I was in medical school in North Carolina in Chapel Hill, you went up to the 4th floor surgery unit, and there on the wall there was a bronze plaque, and it said this surgery center was donated by R.J. Reynolds. Well, all the tumors, from tobacco were taken out in those OR rooms. So the millions and millions and millions of dollars in profit from the tobacco industry lined the pocket of R.J. Reynolds, and they donated $1 or $2 million to open an OR, not to mention all of the suffering and pain and death that was caused through the many years of addiction through all those North Carolinians. So this just shows the industry privatizes the profits, but externalizes all these costs. So the myths that the industry wants you to believe is there's nothing we can do about the addiction rates. We know that's not true. 10% of the population will be an addict no matter what happens, but we know that's also not true because of our diagram with Iceland. We saw the addiction rates went right down. There's nothing we can do because it's basically up to a person's genetics. We know that's not true too because in Iceland the genetics didn't change, but the addiction rates came right down. So our focus must be on treatment instead of prevention. And the point of this talk is prevention is also important. There's the diagram. So this I got from Mariah, who's our Burlington prevention specialist. She says 90% More than 90% of people with substance abuse problem began smoking, drinking, or using other drugs before the age of 18. And this is just another diagram that shows that all these addictive substances tend to, not entirely, but tend to run together. So the second part of the program is about how did Iceland actually bring those rates down? So this is a diagram that reminds me of a story. So this is the story they tell in Iceland. They've got a guy standing by the river, and he looks up, and there's a baby in the water, right? So he jumps in the water, and he saves that baby, and he gets out. He feels great. He saved a baby's life, you know. And he looks up, and there's another baby in the river, and he dives in the river, and he gets 2 babies, and he feels great. But then he looks up, and there are 5 babies in the river. And so then, you know, he grabs his friend, and they try to get them. They can't do it. So they tap them, his shoulder, and let's look upstream, and they put a barrier up and prevent the babies from dropping in, and then you don't have the babies. Basically what we're doing right now is intensive care medicine for our addiction epidemic. And if we did like vaccinating for polio, then we wouldn't have iron lung, we wouldn't have braces or wheelchairs or whatnot. So the whole point of Iceland is to spend our money upstream on the younger kids and on the environment, and then later on we won't have such an intensive problem with addiction. So this diagram shows that $1 spent on prevention saves $10 later on. So I think I'm out of time. I'm happy to go on, but this is the really beginning of the whole
You've got
Iceland.
1 minute and your time's up.
So this is the whole beginning of the second part of the program, which talks about the specific things that they did in order to turn this trend around. This is a 3-minute video that goes through it. Do you want to do it?
No, we can't. Sorry. But we have another review that comes on.
Dave Hartnett just said to take 2 minutes. You have
Take about time.
You can't do that, Dave, because we've got another group coming on right now. Sorry.
It's
No,
8:07.
you can point time.
It's 8:07, so we have 3 minutes. We can either do the video or we can take questions.
I'm happy
You
to
have
do
until
either.
10 past.
You're using your time, and they go through me. You've got 2 minutes left.
Okay. So I guess we'll do the video.
It was a huge problem, 20, a huge problem. In 20 years, Reykjavik went from being worse in Europe when it came to youth drinking, smoking, and use of drugs, to being the best. And that's kind of incredible, isn't it?
We are getting ready for a walk around the neighborhood to see if we have some kids wandering about that should be home already because it's after 10 o'clock. They are under age to be out after 10, and we close them. If you find kids, usually it's like that. They will just go home. But these were not drinking, they were just out. That's a different from the old days.
We try to be at home around 4, 5 the latest, and we try to be together until they go to bed at around 8. We are more, I think, today protective of childhood than we were.
And I think also in the old days there was more liberty and people were not as aware of the risks and dangers as people tend to be today.
But we are a boring country.
We
train about 5 or 6 times a week, just after school, usually around 5:30.
We like to go swimming. We try to do that every day. I often go with my brother to play volleyball.
The girls also play football, and also horse riding is very popular.
We measure different aspects of their lives, their relations to peers and family, substance use, and how they feel. We create a report for each community, and within 2 months of the survey, each school has the findings so that they can figure what do we need to do in order to create the best circumstances for the kids in our community.
First, you have to decide to build what you do on evidence and research. Secondly, you have to fund it and get people out there talking to the parents, talking to the schools, talking to the youth clubs, and everyone that has to be involved.
Let's keep in mind, kids, they don't want to use drugs. They want to be able to lead happy, healthy lives.
We probably beat England in the European final because of the program.
Okay, so that's, we'll stop there, and we can talk more about Iceland another time. But I think it's sort of a natural break in the sense that the second half of the talk goes into the nitty-gritty of what they actually did to turn the curve. And there's a lot of detail to it.
Request
So.
another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. We're going to move to City Hall Park. Donna Walters.
Yes. Okay.
Are you doing electronic too or not?
No.
No.
So my name is Donna Walters. I am with a group called Keep the Park Green, and we have been pushing back against this plan for...
Without a mic, nobody heard you. You better
Okay.
start. Whoa.
My name is Donna Walters. I'm with a group called Keep the Park Green, and we've been pushing back against this plan that's going to cut so many of the trees, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to tell you that we have 20 minutes on the agenda, and we are going to tell you a little bit about the process or the ballot item, and then we're going to actually read the NPA resolution language and the ballot item, and then I'll do a short presentation, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for questions, and then at the end we're going to ask you to take a vote on whether or not you want to endorse getting this item on the ballot.
Did anybody not give a handout here?
So the handout has the flyer that is the same thing as this sign, and it also has the language that we're going to ask you to vote on. So raise your hand if you need a flyer. And I'd also just like to point out that there are a couple clipboards going around. One is the signature to actually sign, and then the other clipboard is if you'd like to sign up to be on our email list. So what's going on right now is we started in September collecting signatures to get this item on the ballot that will cancel the plan. And
So I have the clipboards here. I don't think they're going around. I think they're at the table.
is there anyone who'd like to sign it that hasn't signed?
We'd be happy to give you the opportunity to sign after you see the presentation. How's that sound?
They'll be on the table afterwards. So the way the ballot item works is it's an advisory item because we're not it's an advisory item, and the way that works is that even if we collect the required number of signatures, which is 1,900 approximately, and we estimate that we'll have to actually collect over 3,000 to get 1,900 valid signatures, because they throw out about a third of them because they can't read them, somebody signed who doesn't actually live in Burlington, or things like that. So even after we collect the required number of signatures, the city council votes on whether or not they want to put it on the ballot. So they could very well not put it on the ballot. And we know from previous city council votes that the majority of the city council did not want to make any changes to this plan, to the design, in order to save trees. So the reason why we're going around to all the NPAs is because we feel like at least 80% of the people that we've approached are not liking the plan and want to see it on the ballot, but our city councilors feel different, and we want to pressure them to actually vote to put it on the ballot. So that's the little civic lesson part of it. Oh, so if the city, it takes a majority of city councilors to put it on the ballot, the mayor could veto that vote, and then it would take a 2/3 majority of the city council to override the mayor's veto. So that means 8 of our 12 city councilors would have to vote to override a mayor's veto. Okay, so before I get into the presentation, I would like to read the back side of the flyer if you want to follow along. It has, the top part is the actual resolution language for the NPA, and then the bottom is what is actually on the petition. So Wards 4 and 7 NPA resolution. We, the undersigned residents of Wards 4 and 7 do hereby petition our Wards 4, 7, and North District City Councilors to support the measure to place the City Hall advisory item on the town meeting day ballot. Whereas City Hall Park ballot item is advisory, and the City Council votes to decide which items appear on the town meeting day ballot, and whereas the City Council could vote not to put the City Hall Park item on the ballot, even though the required number of signatures have been collected, and whereas the NPA vote is not a yay or nay vote on the City Hall Park ballot item itself, but rather an advisory resolution for our city councilors to have an opportunity to hear from the electorate by giving the voters a chance to weigh in on the issue. Shall we, the members of Ward 4-7 NPA, advise our city councilors to vote to place the City Hall Park item on the March town meeting day ballot? So that's what we're going to be asking for a vote for when we're done with our presentation and the questions and answers. The actual ballot item language is, we, the undersigned voters of the City of Burlington, hereby petition our City Council to warn the advisory resolution below for a town meeting vote. Whereas City Hall Park needs work, but the city's current redevelopment plan removes approximately 40% of the trees and increases the paved area to cover about 1/3 of the park at an estimated cost of $4 million. Shall we, the citizens of Burlington, advise the mayor and city council to A, cancel the current plan for City Hall Park that was approved by the city council on June 25th, 2018, and B, instead, repair, maintain, and improve the park by preserving more existing trees and shaded areas, repairing grass and existing walkways, increasing lighting and benches, and retaining the historic character of the park. So on the flyer here, what you have on the top is a map of all of the trees in the park, and it shows the ones in red are all the ones that are going to be cut. And actually 7 of them have already been removed, and they'll be removing the rest of them in the spring. So that is a total of 28 out of 58 trees. There were 58 trees there last summer, not this summer, but summer of 2017. And 5 were cut down that were in hazardous condition. Nobody had a problem with them cutting down trees in hazardous condition. And 2 trees blew down in a windstorm. So what you will see down here, the two maps, this is a map of the existing hardscape and green space in the park, the before and the after. And so you can see how these two pass right here, and just to orient you a little. This is St. Paul and Church Street, College and Main Street, and it's the same for these down here. So you can see how these two paths are widened and slightly moved, and that was to accommodate increased foot traffic. Unfortunately, these trees right here and these trees right here are directly in the way of where they want to move those paths. We already have paths with trees on either side, but they want to relocate them and cut down 6 trees there. And then this big grassy area here, this big triangle that they want to pave, is right out the back door of Burlington City Arts. And this is that triangle right there, and you can see there's 7 or 8 trees in that triangle that will be cut down. And that is to increase vendor space and performance space. So we learned from okay, I probably need to wrap it up. We learned from an article a couple weeks ago in 7 days that the farmers market is moving out for a year or 2. And when they come back, the farmers market will be setting up on the outside. They won't be setting up in the center anymore because it's the setup from the vendors' tents and all the extra foot traffic that is compacting the soil. And the compacted soil is what's impacting the health of so many of the trees. So just to be clear though, these trees are not being cut down because of their health. They're being cut down because they're in the way of the plan that the mayor and the city council was not willing to flex 1 iota on changing the location or leaving it. If you just left the footprint of the park the way it is, we wouldn't have to cut down so many trees. So I guess I just want to open it up to questions and answers.
Yes. What would they say? What's their argument? What is their argument?
Well, I can tell you the argument, and I'll try to talk fast. This plan was put forth by the director of the Burlington City Arts. As you can see, Burlington City Arts will profit from taking this public space and turning it into an area for their own use for weekends in the summer, and we'll be losing all the shade out of this area. We'll be losing all the shade out of this particular area. There are a lot of concerns about this plan that we have. First of all, we are in a position where we are constantly being asked to approve TIF bonds to support more projects. Why are we spending $4 million to completely denude the park of trees? And their own documents, which you can see on our website, keeptheparkgreen.com, and our Facebook page, Keep the Park Green. The paving is like amazing. Even in their own drawings, it's essentially mostly concrete. They said that they wanted to turn it into a walkway to increase more traffic around, more foot traffic through there. This is not being designed as a place for people who would like to come and relax there on a hot day. I work for a science agency. I'm also an attorney. I have gone through all the documents. This plan has been in place since 2011. And the gentleman who got the contract to do this is the husband of a city employee. So there's a nepotism issue that we're concerned with. But the main issue here is most people were never told about how the trees would be cut down in this plan. Keep the Park Green are the only ones who brought forward at the last minute how many trees would be cut down. We attended 22 different planning meetings for this park, and they never would tell us how many trees would be cut down. Even when it was right before the DRB meeting, we had to find it on a website under a button that said coming soon. And that's how we were able to break the news to the public. Yes.
How old is the current fountain that's there? And my other question is, does their new plan, I heard that includes a coffee shop in the middle of the park?
Yes, and strangely enough, the DRB did not approve to have a commercial coffee shop there. And, you know, you can stand in City Hall Park and take a rock and throw it in any direction and hit a coffee shop.
Right.
And this is going to create more trash, and it's more privatization of a public space. I think that our issues are the burden that's being placed for the taxpayers when there are so many other projects that need money, that's why our language in the ballot is so conservative, because we feel that this is the common sense way to preserve the attributes of the park that people particularly enjoy now, that it's cooler. It's not just little saplings, it's mature trees, which provide a wide variety of benefits. So,
How old is the fountain?
the fountain is excuse me?
1906.
1906? No, that was not, it was moved from somewhere else. But it is certainly, let me just tell you, it's old enough so that the trough around it was designed for horses to drink out of. That's how old it is.
Yeah, but it's been remodeled.
That hasn't been remodeled, it may have been repaired. We're not sitting here to, get in an argument about the age of the fountain. A lot of people like the fountain. A lot of people like the idea of a central fountain. We would love to have a reproduction of the original fountain that was there, which was absolutely beautiful. But people seem to really like the idea of a central fountain, so.
If you want to do the resolution, we really should have
Okay,
that started now.
all right, and we're available for questions. You can contact us at Keep the Park Green. We want to hear from you. We want to share information with you. And we thank you for your time listening to us today. Thank you.
So, we don't often, as the NPAs, do resolutions, but that actually is one of the things that gives the community the most power, is community-driven resolutions.
You'll have the mic closer to your mouth.
How's this working?
Yes.
That's better. Okay, I'm sorry, you're right. So what I want to do is these guys.
No.
Oh, yeah, that's much better. Maybe. So they're on the back of your agenda is a printed version of a resolution.
It's also on the back of the flyer.
On the back of the flyer. Okay, so take a moment, just read that resolution. Effectively, it is to seek our recommendation to the council that they put this item as a ballot item. So we're not, if you vote to put it on a ballot item, you're not voting for it or against it. You're simply saying to city council, to the mayor, as an advisory, we here would like to see this question voted on by the community. So that's what it is. Give you a moment to read it.
It's the same one we read out loud.
Oh, you already read it?
Yeah, we
Sorry.
read it out loud.
All right. See, I should pay attention. Okay. So I will move that the resolution be as written. Is there anybody who has some amendments? Going once, going twice, gone. All right, that was easy. Seconded? Anybody?
I'll second.
Seconded. All right. All those in favor? First of all, I do need to make sure. We can only vote as if you live in 4 and 7. If you're not a resident in 4 and 7, please do not yay or nay. Or shall we do it by hands? That way, Okay. So, if in favor, show of hands in favor. Okay. Somebody do some counting. All right, we'll see if we're close. Nays? Pretty obvious. Okay, so the resolution as printed passed. So we will make sure that it progresses its way to city councilors. Our two city councilors are here, but we'll make sure that it gets down to City Hall as well. Okay. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you for having us.
Very optimistic. Too optimistic.
Thanks, Jim.
The mayor would approve the 14-story building. It's not going to stop there.
We like to believe that we do our best and we go down swinging.
We'll next move to the elected officials.
No, they season 2 or something. Sites, Are you the only school board?
Looks like it, yeah.
Is it school board or is that everybody?
Everybody.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead, we'll just take school board and then city council. Are there any legislative people?
Yeah, they're all here. Carol.
They can all come.
Yeah,
Just
they're coming
one-
now. They're coming now.
My name's Monica Ivanchich, and I'm Ward 7 School Board.
Wait just a minute, somebody.
My name is Monica Ivanchich, and I'm Ward 7 School Board Representative. I don't have much to report, but I do want to thank the city for voting yes on the BHS re-envisioning. I think citywide it's 73.8% voted yes. The measure passed also in Ward 4 and 7. So everyone on the school board would like to thank you for this vote. We're in desperate need of a new high school. Otherwise, we're entering budget season, and so we just had a meeting, I think it was the first, essentially our first budget meeting last night, where we look at the desires of the district leaders and also the school board members, and where we think we need improvements in our classrooms and our schools. So the budget talks are starting right now, and aside from those two, with the high school, we're going to be doing planning for about a year and a half, and I believe that we dig ground in the spring of 2020, if everything goes according to plan.
Are they going to have community and people involved in the
Yes,
plan?
there'll be community outreach, definitely. We have a community engagement committee that's meeting tomorrow evening from 6 to 8 at North Middle School. So, so I think at this point, we're looking for ideas of how to engage the community and making sure everyone's voices are heard. And then our next school board meeting is on Tuesday, December 11th at 6 p.m. Likely at BHS. That's where they've been the last several months, but I'm not, location TBA, to be announced.
Can I make a suggestion? Number one, people going into the high school don't know where the cafeteria is. And there aren't any signs there if they're new to know how to get there. And also, it's not an easy place to get into. Sometimes the door for the handicap thing I've heard is not open.
True, and I'm kind of new at entering the high school myself, but I usually go up the handicap ramp and then that door at the end of the outside handicap ramp, because now there's an inside one too. That one's open. And then essentially you go into the main area and you go straight back.
But signs would help.
Signs would help, true. We'll make a note of that.
And a sign on the front that says handicapped around, because don't know that. If they come after dark.
That's true. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Better signage would be good. Okay.
Hi, thanks for coming. I first want to really just thank you for the opiate presentation. It is such a problem, and not only here in Burlington, Vermont, but across our country. It's amazing some of the results they've had in Iceland. I have seen the entire presentation. I wish we would have had time to see the entire presentation tonight. But we understand that, the steering committee does their best with time limits, and I know it's difficult.
She's going to come back.
She's going to come back, which is great. And so, but it was well done, and I am in hopes to maybe traveling to Iceland with you for that 5-day seminar to learn more and bring some of that great information back. Because I agree that we are spending too many of our resources, including our city resources, at the top of this problem. And I want to save lives, and I understand that, but we're really, as it was said in the presentation, we're not taking care of the leaks. The pipes are bursting all over the place, and you know, and we're just concerned about the leaks that are going on now, and we're forgetting about the pipes. And the pipes, to me, are the next generation. And so we need to address that, and so hopefully we will. Is this a question on opiates?
I actually just wondered if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Dave Hartnett, North District City Councilor.
Thank you.
Okay. I forget, some people come in late, we did more, my apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I hope that, you know, we'll have an opportunity to see the full presentation and go from there. The other thing I'd like to talk about tonight is I'm chair of the PAC committee here in Burlington, and we have a brand new event for New Year's Eve called Highlight here. And so we do have a celebration here in Burlington, New Year's Eve, and it's going to be exciting. We'll still have the fireworks at 8 o'clock at the waterfront. Some of the new events, we're going to have a bonfire down at the waterfront for kids and families, and we'll be roasting marshmallows down there, and it will be a big event. We'll have a lot of arts and music going on throughout the entire city, including out here. We'll have some activities at Letty Arena, skating and other activities. So it will be a different event this year. Other than first night, it will be less expensive for families. I believe it's $10 for a pink ribbon and $5 for children. And there's scholarships available. We're going to have the big parade that we have every year on Church Street at 4 o'clock. The dragon. So it's going to be a great event. I know it's been kind of quiet. We haven't really talked about it much. You haven't heard much about it. Hopefully in the next couple weeks, we'll start getting some PR and some press out there, but it's going to be a wonderful night in Burlington. I hope you all join us, and it should be a lot of fun. And we're not meeting in December, is that correct?
Right.
So I hope everyone.
We got a whole month off for good behavior.
Which is good. That doesn't happen very often out here. But I hope everybody has a safe and happy holiday season.
Why don't you pass it to Ali, because then it'll be the city councils, and then we can do, does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Ali Jeng, and I'm a city councilor for Ward 7. I have a lot of updates, but we'll try to keep them very short. And I think one of them, Councilor Hartnett just talked about it, which is incredible, highlights. And the most important thing for families to remember though about highlight. The bonfire, not the bonfire, the fireworks, it's at 8 o'clock. It's not 6 this time. And there will be only one. Not one in midnight and 6 o'clock, just one 8 o'clock. That's not music. And I think why this is great is that the event that used to happen every year, you know, they decided to not do it anymore, which is an organization, and if you remember, they will take a year to raise the money. But this Burlington CDR did step up, and no funds, but just yesterday, I believe that the council gave them $20,000, you know, to cover the cost. And you know, already they selling their the bracelets, so you can have a bracelet and go to any of the performances and entertainment in the city. I think that's important. Let's not miss it, and let's all come together because it's new. We come together, and I think you know next year it will be better every year. And the second thing, and just to say thank you. 22 days ago, maybe 24 days ago. We were here, it was November 6th, we were here voting. And I think the new North End showed up stronger to elect their candidates and to participate in the local government. I think the winners are the parents, the grandparents, the guardians that showed up with their children. I spent the day here, and always when I see a child coming out of him, it was just amazing. Just to want to make sure that the democracy of the United States, of our town, will continue. I think that's amazing. And also wanted to say thank you to all those 8,335 people that casted their votes for me as their justice of the peace. I think it was amazing. It was 330, but my wife and I, to make it 35, doesn't count. $8,300.
You sure your wife voted for you?
Oh, yeah. She better. And I think, you know, for the first time, we voted together with the kids. I was looking sometimes. Yeah, and I think it was amazing. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for making sure that our democracy will just keep on going strong. And congratulations to both Ori and Mr. Hooper. That will be being our representative moving forward. So I think the second thing, the third thing, is at the council on the 26th, we talked about permit reform. If you live in Burlington, and you want to, do a reparation in your kitchen or add a bathroom or something, you go through hoops to get your permit. It's very hard. But for the first time, I think the council with the mayor, we decided to work on a permit reform. So basically, we took that issue and forwarded it to the Charter Change Committee, and the Charter Change Committee will get back to us with recommendation on December 17th, just to make it easier for everyone. If you want a permit, you go one spot, and then you get all you need and you go on. Because it used to be, you go to code, you go to zoning, you go to different places to get one permit. But I think this is the right thing to the right direction, which is encouraging for everyone. After permit reform, we also did talk about the business personal property tax. It is called BPP. And what is business personal property tax? It is a tax that is being paid by small businesses. And not all small businesses are paying it. Property personal tax is basically the equipments that you have. It can be the chairs, it can be anything. Those, if they valued about $45,000, if their value is $45,000 or more, you have to pay that tax. And it is taxed at 120%. But that specific tax used to bring to the city $1,300,000 a year. If all the businesses pay, $1,300,000 come to the city. Now, the city of Burlington is looking into raising that tax, taking it away so that the businesses can strive. We all know small businesses are the backbone of Vermont's economy. And this tax, not all municipalities are doing it. Not all of them. In Chittenden, it's only Burlington and Winooski who are still collecting that specific tax. Now, it's not going to be today or tomorrow. It will be in 2026. 2026. That's when we will be able to raise that tax. So those businesses will no longer pay. Now, the question to ask is why 2026? Because $1,300,000 is not $200,000. It's a lot of money. But why 2026? Two things. One of them is in 2026, the city of Burlington will start to collect the TIF money. It's about $900,000 TIF, water from TIF, $900,000 a year. But $103,900,000, there is still a little bit of gap, $400,000, where the city of Burlington will be able to find that money. So we haven't made any decision, but we did receive a detailed presentation from the Burlington CFO, Beth Anderson, and also she gave us a memo that was very well written, very detailed, and you can find it at the city's website. Incredible. So we talked about that, and also that specific item will also go to the Charter Change Committee. So they've been very busy lately, that committee. So that's a treat. And I think the fourth one, we have a resident here in the New North End. Her name is Kimberly Dunn. And Kimberly Dunn also is the executive director for Home Share Vermont. And you guys are probably familiar with the term dwelling assessing unit. I know Mr. Ryan Klink is happy about this thing. So basically it is for residents, especially the elderly, will be able to add a kind of like a small apartment, maybe 1 bedroom, and that 1 bedroom, 2 people can live there, that will have a kitchen, that will have, bathroom and things like that. It is very hard to get, very hard. But from Share Vermont, they did a presentation not long ago at Burlington Parks and Recreation, and it was very well attended, very well. And they did the presentation to us. So basically they are waiting for, they did write a letter to be able to access a grant from the state of Vermont. So let's wish them well. And if they have access to it, it will be easier for each and every one of us who have a home to be able to access that program. And you will be able also to, get some money. And if you are an elderly, you will be able to live with other people without not paying them that much. I think those are a couple of things that the council currently are working on. And most of them by December 17th, you will be able to know what is next. Now, yeah, so for now, and we'll look for questions. Thank you all for being here.
I'm Carol Udi, and I'm one of your 2 state representatives, and thank you very
Hold the
much.
mic close.
And thank you very much for re-electing me to serve for another 2 years. Quite honored and very thankful. So today we were in Montpelier for a legislative briefing. And one of the things that we heard about was the letter from Moody's, which downgraded Vermont's AAA bond rating to A2, AA1. So we learned that we are facing low growth prospects from an aging population. And I think that, I'm certainly, and I know that you all are aware of that because it's something that you brought up as I went door to door. So with slower than average growth, our long-term liabilities will weigh more heavily on our economic base and may manifest in growing cost pressures. So the rating, although it's downgraded, it also is not downgraded as much as it might have been because it looks at the underlying health of our economy, which is pretty good, a stable and solid financial position, and strong management and governance of state fiscal matters. So as far as states go, we are doing super well in terms of managing our budget. So factors that could lead to an upgrade would be to improve our demographic trend and our economic trend to more closely mirror what's happening in our nation and in other states that are growing better. So what could we do to help with that? And in the last legislative session, you heard me tell you about the Green Mountain Secure Retirement Account, which is to help small businesses who have fewer than 50 employees who don't offer retirement plans, to allow the state to run the retirement plan and to allow businesses to be able to do what they do best and not worry about running a retirement plan. That helps small business, and it helps the economy, and it helps our people. So something that didn't happen, we weren't able to successfully pass last time, which we're working on again this time, something good for employers, for the economy, for babies and parents, for people, is paid family leave. Now the way that works is it's actually an insurance program, and it provides Vermont families with up to 12 weeks of bonding leave when they have or adopt a baby, and allows Vermonters to take care of their families with up to 6 weeks of leave for care. And that the employees, not the employers, pay in, and it costs less than 2 cents an hour for every $10 an hour that employees make. And then it's capped at a certain salary amount. So that would keep it affordable. That's the way the bill looked last time. It's shaping up again this time. I look forward to any input you all have about how that might change or look in the current session. But something that I have been pushing for is to have longer than 12 weeks for the bonding leave when a new infant is there. 12 weeks is not very long for a recuperating birthing mother, and a baby is still very dependent on nursing, which is something, or drinking formula, but basically it's very dependent on not solid foods, and the longer that the mom and the child have to be together, or the father and the child, the better for that baby. And another thing is to child care costs. When I went around, I heard very distinctly, there are people paying more for their child care costs than for their mortgage, and as much for their health care costs as for their mortgage. This is untenable, so you have to make inroads on these two areas. And finally, Lake Champlain, sorry, I have a weird thing. Lake Champlain cleanup. Lake Champlain, $2.5 billion a year is what it brings into this economy of the state. And that's with tourism and revenue directly related to the lake. So we have to clean it up. We've got a promise to clean it up anyway with the federal government, and that means reallocating or creating funding for that cleanup. I could go on, but I think I'll just stop and say those are some very high priorities this session.
Thank you, ma'am. I will start by saying until January 9th, I'm just one of the people that should be sitting out there, as I was before everybody started waving. But I just went through 3 days of sitting in Montpelier listening to everyone from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to the tax commissioner to just about everybody from state government that they could bring in. And it's called training, but it's actually immersion in too much information so that every night you go home at 8 o'clock and your head is spinning. I would say that in those couple of days, I don't want to channel Bill Aswad, who used to be a rep, but this morning I saw a very interesting presentation on new transportation modes going from here down to the Montpelier corridor. All Earth Renewables has purchased a whole bunch of self-propelled rail cars, and where we do bus traffic now, they're going to start to try to revive lines that exist all over the state. I think they bought 18 of them. Looks very promising. A lot of people, when, as Carol mentioned, you go around to the door, people spontaneously tell you, cut my damn taxes. One of the things that I learned is that that's a very hard thing to do because there's so much of the budget that is locked in that to say I want to cut taxes 1% for each and every Vermonter means that you're going to cut some program by 5 or 6%. So the extended impact of those things is very complicated. Carol's right, lake cleanup is going to be a very high priority. There were probably 40 new faces that came in this particular session. And I would note that every bill that was around last session is now gone, and the slate is wiped clean for the biennium. Of those 40 people, I bet 39 of them were talking about plastic and making it disappear. I would advise you when you go to Hannaford, take your bag with you. That plastic thing is not going to be available long. Fills our landfill, uses a natural resource. It's made from things that come out of the ground. A lot of countries, even our own cities in Vermont, have banned them. I see that as something that's coming down the pike. And that's all I'm going to say. Although I agree that, although I don't characterize it as health care, I think our health care system is pretty good, but our health insurance system has their hand way too far in our pocket. So when people start to talk about change to those systems, I wouldn't be surprised that something new and inventive might come out of the legislature this year. I'm Bob Hooper, you got here late. Just the introductions.
We've got about 5 minutes for questions.
The Moran plant is back in the news. I thought we killed it. That's a question.
I understand that question.
Here, you take it first. Okay.
Be careful. It is back in the news. Because we got to do something. Right? And that's still an option. The price tag of removing the Moran plant, tearing it down, taking it down, has jumped. We're talking millions and millions of dollars to tear that building down. And so I think, I can't say because I don't know 100%, I don't want to get in trouble. You've given me a warning here, be careful. I think we're going to be presented to council and hopefully the public, presented with kind of a hybrid plan of taking some of it down and keeping some of it there and making it part of our waterfront. But I don't know that for 100% because they haven't given us the whole details yet. But I do think we have a plan for that building that will address two issues. One, we'll finally have finalization on Moran. And two, I do think parts of it will be taken down. And what the other part of Moran might look like, we're not sure yet. But we will have closure on Moran here within the next, I would say, 6 to 12 months as far as what it's going to look like. I will tell you that I've been on board on every plan that they presented, and every plan has fallen flat. And so I'm at the point now where we either do this or it does come down, because we cannot continue to go down this path. And so hopefully this will be it. And when we know, you'll know.
Is that 2 more?
Did you have a question? No. You go. Nope. Can't hear him, but okay. Sorry.
Hi. First of all, Carol, thank you for email correspondence we've been having about taxes. Bob, you just mentioned taxes. But there is this idea of a carbon tax, and there is a report that the legislature is going to get early next year. Could you say something about that, please?
I have not read extensively about it. What I do know about it is that there seems to be an initiative, a little bit of steam behind putting a price on carbon. The thing that I personally have always questioned about it is if I'm a low-income individual and I go out and I have to buy a gallon of gas to get to work and I pay the extra tax and I don't get that back until I file my income tax, or at some point, I've essentially lent the state money that I don't have the use of. And if we're looking to mitigate the environmental issue and at the same time making life harder for people who are economically disadvantaged, I think we should be looking for a different mechanism to some degree. And I, as I've said, haven't read all that much about what's on the table at this point, so what I'm saying is kind of off the cuff. But that economic disadvantagement is my main concern for the issue. Now, I don't know if you were here when I said, but I should talk to you about the F-35 thing after this.
So we're almost done, so this is going to be a short question and needs to be kind of a short answer. I think it was Ollie, but somebody mentioned the permit reform and how important it is that we get that done. I also am hearing that the that part of the latest solution is to do a merger between CEDO and planning and zoning, some combination of that. If they couldn't figure it out in a meeting, they went many hours last night to try to sort that out. I'm a little concerned that if we rush, we have to solve permit reform, but I'm not sure that moving planning out of being autonomous from the mayor position, moving it into CEDO as a solution for permit reform is the best way to do that. I still want to do some more homework on it. And my concern is if we have to solve permit reform, it's been on the books to be solved for a long time. Can I get your assurance that there's going to be, if you put it on the ballot to merge these departments without considerable civic engagement about what it means to merge departments and what it means to have certain elements with autonomy, so that if there's a plan, if you have a developer mayor overseeing an employee that is your planning department, there becomes room. It's not just about the current mayor. You make that permanent, that becomes problematic. So I don't want to in any way slow down permit reform, but I want to caution that permit reform and merging departments, there are a few other power play concerns I have right now about what's going on there. Just want to make sure that those two don't get married together in a way where people's rush to permit reform turns into a political structure that we may regret in the years to come. So, quick thoughts.
I don't know if it's a question or comment, but I think
I was going to say there's no question.
But I understand where you're coming from, and I choose to not include that because maybe many people won't understand, but I'm glad that you've been following it.
Yeah, I think it's important to include it because people hear permit reform and go, yay, let's vote for it.
And again, and I think nothing is final here yet.
Thank you.
And one of them is just that we send it to the charter change, and they will get back to us December 17th. But I don't think, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think that combining CEDO and planning is at the table at this point. I think the council decided to take that off the table and to just focus on the permit reform. And I also understand where the mayor and his administration been coming from. Two things: efficiency, if we combine those two entities to be more efficient, and also accountability, because there is a problem in the city sometimes. Who is accountable of what? And that makes sense, but I don't think that it has been sold to the council. And the council, I don't think they
He's right, there has been no decision made, and the message from the council was to slow down the process as far as the combination of departments, but go ahead with permit reform. So Councilor Dang is absolutely correct in saying that the council sent a message, at least the majority of the council sent a message saying, whoa on merging departments, but yes on permit reform.
In the interest of time, it's about 9:03.
Great.
I'm going to adjourn this meeting and thank everybody for coming out.
Remind everybody to help put chairs.
And of course, we'll help put chairs away later. But do drive safe going home.